Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you to the Business and Utility Subcommittee. Today is Wednesday, February the 26th, 2025. It is 3 p.m. I'd like to call this meeting to order. If you can make sure, everyone, that you are logged in properly to your device. And Madam Clerk, if you can get us on the board, we'll go ahead and take the roll. Representative Hardaway, somebody help him, give him a hand up there. Members, I just want to take a minute to say I'm so glad y'all could join us today. We're going to plan to continue to meet at 3 p.m. on Wednesdays here. All right, Madam Clerk, take the roll, please.
Mr. Chairman, you have 2 members present.
Thank you. Do we have any personal orders before we get started today? I do want to recognize we do have some friends from the Propane Association with us today, but I wanted to specifically call out Luke and Andy Stewart from Advanced Propane in Lebanon, Tennessee. We want to welcome you guys today. Make them feel welcome, folks. Representative Barrett, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have 2 orders this morning or this afternoon. First of all, on the right-hand side over here, the man with the silver beard is Paul Pitney, the CEO of the Dixon County Family YMCA. Glad to have him up here today. And in the very back row with the Propane Gas Association, very dapper young man with the goatee. Actually grew up across the street from me. I think we've ridden bicycles on every dirt path around Ravenwood subdivision in Dixon County when we were 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. So Chris Daniel here with the Propane Gas Association.
Members, do we have any other personal orders? If not, we do have a housekeeping item. Item number 8, that's House Bill 1108 by Representative Salinas, is rolled till March the 19th. All right, folks, we do have a calendar to take up, so let's go ahead and get started on that. And we're on item number 1, that's House Bill 421 by Speaker Pro Tem Marsh. We have a motion, we have a second, and Speaker Marsh, it looks like we do have an amendment. Can you verify your drafting code, please?
3624.
That is what I'm showing. Do you need to explain that, or does it make the bill?
That just made a technical correction in the bill.
Okay, let's go ahead and put it on the members. Can I get a motion second on the amendment? We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor of amending the bill, say aye. All opposed, say no. The ayes have it. Sir, your bill is amended and you're recognized for explanation.
Thank you, sir. Currently, utility officials are required to get 12 hours of continuing education within the first year of serving on a utility board and an additional 12 hours within the next 3 years. What this bill does is say the next 3 years, they don't have to get 12, they only have to get 6. And it also says, the second part of the legislation is that if a commissioner or utility commissioner who fails to get the training in a timely manner, then they lose their seat on the board. This gives them a way to get back on the board if the board wants them to come back and they get the continual education, they can petition to come back on the board. Those are the 2 things that it does. I'll take any questions.
Okay. Sponsor, we appreciate that explanation and appreciate you working to get in a good posture. I think last week or the week before. Members, you've heard the explanation. Do we have any questions for the sponsor? Leader Camper, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Speaker Marsh, can you talk to us why we want to do this reduction? Didn't we do something with credits last year around this?
Speaker Marsh.
I don't remember if we did it last year, but the reason we're doing this is they get 12 hours as soon as they get on the board. Mm-hmm. And then it says you got to get another 12 hours in the next 3 years. We're just cutting that down into 6 because it's redundant. And they really don't need all that training. Mm-hmm. That's the main reason they're telling me that they want to do it.
Okay.
Leader Camper, you got any follow-up?
No, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you.
Members, any other questions for Speaker Marsh? Representative Hardaway, you recognized.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Speaker Marsh, for the legislation. When we're looking at the content of the training, that remains the same? It's just we're not having redundancy? Is that the way to read this?
Speaker Marsh.
Thank you. That's the way I understand it. It's the same amount, same training. It's just cutting out a lot of the redundancy. And these people, a lot of them have been on the commission for several years. And I think that they already know most of these rules and regulations.
Representative Hardaway, you got anything else?
Thank you, sponsor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I had. And he did an excellent job in responding.
Thank you.
Members, any other questions? If not, we're going to go ahead and vote to send this to full commerce. Madam Clerk, if you can open the vote up. And members, all in favor vote aye, all opposed no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? If not, Madam Clerk, take the vote, please.
Mr. Chairman, you have 10 ayes.
Members, House Bill 421 passes as amended and goes to full commerce. Congratulations,
Thank you,
Mr.
Mr.
Speaker.
Chairman. Committee.
Members, that brings us to item number 2, and that's House Bill 871 by Representative Rudder.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second, and Representative Rudder, it looks like we have an amendment on that. Is that what you're showing?
Yes, I do.
What drafting code do you have, please?
03950.
Okay, that's what I'm showing as well. Do you want to go ahead and put it on there before you explain the bill?
Please.
Okay, members, can I get a motion and a second on the amendment? All in favor of amending the bill, say aye. All opposed, say no. The ayes have it. Sponsor, you are recognized on your bill.
Well, thank you. Under current law, a developer is required to hold buyers' deposits in escrow until closing. HB 871 would allow those developers and the buyers to enter into an agreement so that the buyer's deposit could be used toward construction. Passage of House Bill 871 would enable developers to move forward with approved projects more efficiently, helping to address the growing demand for housing in Tennessee. And with that, I ask for your support and also stand ready for any questions.
Representative Bricken, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to the sponsor, certainly, I think there's an added issue with that makes this legislation even better, because if they have those agreements, they have to have a bond or a surety letter of credit. So that deposit money is protected.
That's
Sponsor?
correct, and thank you for that. Yes.
Chairman Latford, are you recognized?
Thank you, sponsor. I think that my question just got asked and answered. Thank you.
Representative Burkhart, you recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't like the word deposit. And I talked, when they came by and visited me the other day about this, because to me, this is a down payment. I mean, I don't see this being, a deposit is something you get back when you sell something or when you finish with something, but explain to me that why this is a deposit and not a down payment.
Chairman Rudder, you recognized.
Well, I would say technically, it is a down payment, but it's also like a line of credit also.
Okay.
Representative Burkhart.
It is an agreement between the developer and the buyer based on a deposit that's required by the developer. And the buyer, like I said, agrees with, there's an agreement between those two entities. And the developer can expedite the building of the resident condos through this agreement. That's what the intent of the bill is.
Representative Burkhart.
Okay, thank you. I'm good.
And I just want to reiterate, and we've got some more people on the list, but Representative Burkhart, I had some of the same concerns that you did. The use of the word deposit made me nervous that a contractor was using that for something. But after Chair Lady Rudder came in and spoke with me, and she brought some folks in from the industry, and they really broke it down for me. That's a term that they use when they're holding one that's not been built yet. But essentially, it's going to go toward the construction either way. And so it made me comfortable. They eased my concern, and I just want to say thank you for coming by and Chairman Rudder and clarifying that for me. But we do have some more people on the list, and next up is Chairman Clemens. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what's the timeframe of this look like? So these developers are getting this financing from banks and they're getting these projects approved and moving forward with the construction. When are they entering into these agreements with these condo purchasers? And are the agreements going to be required for purchasers to take part in this condominium project? Or if they're not willing to, they'll move on to the next potential buyer who is willing to? How's this going to operate logistically?
Sponsor, you recognize.
I don't think that it's a requirement. Developers, when they're in the process of developing condos or any development, they meet with potential buyers. They, I guess, put the information out there that they are willing or are thinking about developing in a certain area, building condos in this instance. So they meet with potential buyers, and they offer, they offer this solution to a timely building of the condos. This expedites construction. These can only be used for construction cost. And then once, I guess, the developer would have enough people interested, then he would go to his banker and pitch his proposal based on the people that have committed to him to put down this deposit and start the process.
Chairman Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I'm unclear on how this is going to go down with regards to this. Since these are being used for actual cost, these projects generally don't move forward without the financing on the front end. And I assume they're not selling these condominium units without having financing in place to some extent to have something to build, that have something to sell. So I guess I'm just a little unclear on how this logistically going to play out and how that's going to interact with these lenders as well as the projects themselves, and being selective with whether or not buyers are willing to enter into these agreements if they are permissive. Anyway, yeah, that's my concern, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Chair Lady Rudder, anything on what he said? Okay, let's go ahead and move to Representative Hardaway. You're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon to the chair lady. And a couple of my questions were addressed. I was unsure about the question of whether it's a deposit or not, but initially it is a deposit. And even if it's converted, it still started out as a deposit.
Yes.
And so I'm comfortable with that. When you mentioned that there's a surety bond,
Yes.
That's available in case there needs to be pursuit of remedies for non-performance on the part of the construction. Yes. And the ability to pursue these remedies is not impacted at all, correct?
No, sir.
All right. That's all I had, Chairman. Thank you, ma'am.
All righty. Next up, we have Representative Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'll probably piggyback a little bit off of Representative Hardaway in addressing the concern about this, whether or not this is a deposit or down payment. Currently under the law, and the sponsor can correct me if I'm wrong here, but currently under the law, this is a deposit. The money does not go toward the purchase price until completion of the project. So it works somewhat similar to earnest money. So it is an earnest money deposit that does get applied to the purchase price of the unit. What they're seeking to do with this bill is to allow the contractor to access that money if they are securing it with a line of credit or a security bond to use toward the building process. So it gets converted in that process. With this law in place, it would get converted to where it's being used more as a down payment during that time period. But that's why it's referenced as a deposit in here, because that's what the current law states. That's how it's applied. Is that how you understand it?
That's correct.
All right.
Thank you for that clarification.
And
Go ahead, Representative Barrett.
And if I may, Chairman, sorry. In section 1 of the bill, paragraph A1B, it's requiring that the funds remain in escrow or the surety bond or irrevocable letter of credit remain there unless one of these things happen. And that is they're delivered to the declarant at closing, delivered to the declarant because of the purchaser's default, or refunded to the purchaser. So this bill does provide protections for the buyer that their money is not just going to be eaten up by the builder and they walk off into the sunset with it.
Chair Lady
Absolutely.
Rudder, you are recognized.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Representative Barrett, you good?
I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Next up is Representative Bricken.
Again, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going to try to provide maybe a touch of clarity to Leader Clement's question dealing with the timing. I mean, these are almost pre-sale contracts that most developers have to have X% pre-sales that the bank's going to require in order to put financing in place. So not all banks, but most banks, when there's a condo development, will get whether it's 50%, 70% pre-sales before they'll put the construction financing to them. So just for clarity.
Chair Lady, do you have anything on his?
I do
Okay.
not.
All right. Is there anybody else that has a question for the sponsor on the bill? If not, members, we are going to go ahead and vote. Madam Clerk, if you'll open the board up, we're voting to send House Bill 871 as amended to full commerce. Please cast your vote. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? If not, Madam Clerk, lock in the vote, please.
Mr. Chairman, you have 9 ayes, 1 nay.
House Bill 871 as amended passes. It's on its way to full commerce.
Thank you, Mr.
Congratulations, Chair
Chairman
Lady.
and committee.
Members, that brings us to item number 3. That's House Bill 1154 by my Wilson County friend, Representative Susan Lynn. You're recognized, Representative Lynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Did you have a chance to check your text messages before your?
I did not, but thank you. I appreciate that. Representative
All
Lynn,
right.
I don't see an amendment, so you're clear to start describing your bill, 1154, please.
Thank you, sir. This bill has to do with the self-storage industry, an industry that has been regulated in Tennessee since about 1980. And as such, there needs to be a written lease agreement so that the renter and tenant have understanding of their responsibilities and rights. But over time, an owner may need to amend or revise that lease agreement. And as we know, some people will rent these units for a very long time, even years, and they may need to amend or revise the lease agreement. So what this bill says in section 1 is it permits a facility owner, after notice to the renter, to treat continued use of the space as acceptance of the revision of the lease agreement. This is actually in law in other states, but that way the renter is given notice, and then going forward from then, that would be considered acceptance. The second part of the bill deals with a tenant who poses a danger to the unit, other units, or whatever. Maybe they're doing some sort of illegal activity, storing drugs there or other dangerous items, explosives or whatever. This part would allow the renter the person who rents the unit to the renter to terminate the lease agreement if the tenant is performing some sort of illegal activity, even if they are paying their rent. Usually they have to go to court to terminate a lease agreement, but in the event of illegal activity, this would allow the property owner, the storage unit owner, to say, "I'm sorry, you have to vacate." And that is it.
All right,
That's it.
Representative Lynn, we appreciate that very thorough explanation, and we do have some questions. It looks like, who we got? Oh, Chairman Powers, you recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the sponsor. Does this mean that I've been living in my storage unit for a couple of months? Does this mean I'm going to have to move out if this bill is passed?
Representative Lynn, you recognized.
It could. Of course, the people who are renting to you, they might enjoy you living there. I'm not sure.
Chairman Powers.
Thank you to the sponsor.
Members,
Thank
do
you,
we
Mr.
have any other questions for the sponsor, Representative Hardaway?
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon to you, Chair Lady. When the part of the bill that deals with the termination, if you don't sign a new lease, the termination after 15 days, the termination 2, all right, the notice must provide the occupant with not less than 15 days after delivery of the notice to remove all personal property from the self-service storage facility.
Right.
Aren't most of these facilities 30 days paid in advance?
Representative Lynn.
Thank you. That part is in the event of illegal activity. And oftentimes that illegal activity might be quite dangerous. So 15 days probably is pretty generous in that event if they're conducting dangerous activity. And it does allow the renter then enough time to arrange for their items to be picked up and taken somewhere else.
Representative Hardaway.
All right, thank you. And I guess I'm not comfortable with that. I'll just leave it at that. I'll take the other questions up with you later, ma'am.
Representative Lynn, do you have anything to what he said? Okay, members, do we have any other questions? If not, okay, Leader Camper, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, is there any appeal process in dealing with if there's perceived criminal activity and maybe it was found out that it really wasn't? Is there some type of appeals process for the person after, like the 15-day note? They give them a notice in 15 days. They get a chance to come and I don't know, say, why are you doing this? That really wasn't my storage unit. That was somebody else, or it was a misperception of what we were doing, or something like that.
Representative Land.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's no formal appeal process, but I'm sure the tenant could go to the property owner and say, you know, I'm really not conducting illegal activity, and hopefully reasonableness would prevail. But, you know, no leaser wants to lose a tenant, for sure. They want to keep their tenants, but if there is illegal activity, they have to protect the other tenants and their property.
Leader Camper.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Members, I do not have anyone else on the list, so we're going to go ahead and vote. Madam Clerk, if you'll open the board, we are voting to send House Bill 412 to full commerce. I'm sorry, correction, members. We're voting on House Bill 1154 to send it to full commerce. I hope that doesn't change your vote.
I thought I was going to just leave.
If everyone's still good with that, has every
Can we do
member
both?
voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Madam Clerk, go ahead and take the vote.
Mr. Chairman, you have 8 ayes, 2 nays.
Congratulations, Representative Lynn. House Bill 1154 passes, and it's on its way to full commerce. And next up is Representative Lynn again with House Bill 412.
Thank you. I was hoping we could vote on
We have a
both bills at the
motion.
same
We have a
time.
second. You are recognized on your bill, Representative Lynn.
I was hoping we could vote on both bills at the same time, but.
That's an interesting idea.
Right. This bill deals with the Propane Gas Association. And in the Tennessee Code, there's some obsolete language. So this simply deletes that obsolete language from the code.
All right, sponsor, appreciate the explanation. Members, do we have any questions for the sponsor of the bill? Questions being called. Members, we're going to go ahead and vote. Madam Clerk, if you'll open the board, we're voting to send House Bill 412 to full commerce. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Madam Clerk, please take the vote.
Mr. Chairman, you have 11 ayes, 0 nays.
Congratulations, Representative Lynn. 412, House Bill 412 is on its way to full commerce. It passes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee.
Members, that brings us to item number 5. That's House Bill 478 by Representative McCalman. We have a motion. We have a second. Representative, I do see an amendment. Can you tell me what drafting code you're showing?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I have amendment 1865.
That's not what I'm showing. I'm
Just kidding. I've got amendment 3848.
That's what I'm showing.
It's been a long day, Mr. Chairman.
Can I get a motion and a second on the amendment? We have a motion. We have a second. Do you want to explain the amendment or does it make the bill?
No, Mr. Chairman, it's just a minor change clarifying that
Okay.
this doesn't affect the entire chapter.
We're voting to put amendment 3848 on the bill. All in favor say aye. All opposed say no. The ayes have it. Sir, your bill is amended and you're recognized for explanation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, what House Bill 378 does is allow for off-duty reserve police officers and sheriff deputies to be able to serve as private security guards as a side job without having to go to quote-unquote security guard school. The portion that we talked about in the amendment just says that with the chapter, they're not exempted from the rest of the chapter as are other law enforcement officers. Just for a little bit of background, reserve deputies and officers do have to go through 128 hours of training. At present, training is left up to the relative law enforcement agency. They're required to complete the same 40 hours of in-service training as full-time officers. In the first year and subsequent years, this includes 8 hours of firearms training, 2 hours of emergency vehicle operations, mental illnesses, DUI, child abuse, and sexual abuse training. So with that, I stand ready for questions and renew my motion.
Thank you for that explanation, sponsor, and appreciate you. I think you had an amendment we talked about last week and got this in good posture. Members, do we have any questions for the sponsor on the bill? If not, Madam Clerk, go ahead and open the board. Members, we're going to vote to send House Bill 478 as amended full commerce. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Madam Clerk, take the vote, please.
Mr. Chairman, you have 11 ayes, 0 nays.
Congratulations, sponsor. House Bill 478 is on its way to full commerce. It passes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee.
Members, that brings us to item number 6 on the calendar. That's House Bill 4. I'm sorry, no, it's not. It's House Bill 713 by Representative Alexander. We have a motion. We have a second. Representative Alexander, I am showing an amendment.
Yes, sir.
What drafting code are you showing?
I'm showing 002646.
I've got a different one.
Okay, hang on a minute. Sorry. 00423.
That's what I'm showing. Yeah, 4023.
Okay.
We have a motion and a second on the amendment. Do you want to go ahead and put that on the bill before you explain
Please.
it? Members, let's go ahead and put amendment 4023 on House Bill 713. All in favor say aye. All opposed say no. The ayes have it. Representative Alexander, we're back on your bill as amended. You're recognized for explanation.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, committee. This bill brings the laws that govern cemeteries up to date with Tennessee's southern peers and eliminates outdated regulations that are not businesses or consumer friendly. The amendment on the bill did 3 things. It cleaned up the definition sections in a portion of the bill. Second, it added a hold harmless provision to the section relative to abandonment. And third, it delays the effective date to January 1, 2026. The Department of Commerce and Insurance requested the changes relative to the definitions and the effective date. In short, the bill just cleans up previous drafting errors, eliminates outdated document and memorial installation fees, and allows cemeteries to reclaim unused, abandoned burial spaces in community mausoleums. The Department of Commerce and Insurance was consulted during the drafting of the bill, and the bill is supported by the Cemetery Association of Tennessee. With that, I renew my motion.
Thank you, sponsor, for that explanation. Members, do we have any questions? Chairman Powers, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to the sponsor, thank you for bringing this. I did have a question because I had a couple of people call me about it. When that 75-year provision in there,
Yes.
it said that there must be some type of notification and they have a period of time. What actually is that notification? Some kind of publication? Is it like in the local paper, or how do they handle that?
Representative Alexander, you recognize.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, that notification, hang on just one second so I make sure that I speak correctly on this, but that they have not had contact with the recorded owner or the beneficiary for 75 years. The cemetery has conducted a reasonable search for the owner beneficiary by sending a letter to the last known address, posting a description of the space on the cemetery's website for a year. The bill does not allow spaces in private family mausoleums, those kind of things, or those that have memorial installed on the space to be reclaimed. Just so the committee knows, nonprofit, church, and family cemeteries are not regulated by the state of Tennessee, so this does not include any of them.
Okay.
Chairman Powers, you recognize.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what the publication part of it is not like in a local paper, it's actually on the
It's on their website,
of the,
as well as a letter being sent to the last known address.
right. Yeah, I was just talking about the publication part.
Yes.
That's just on the website for the cemetery. Okay.
Yes, sir.
That's why I was trying to clarify. Thank you.
Representative Bricken, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I thought Chairman Powers would raise the grave issues that you've brought up on this legislation. So.
That's great, Russ.
But the serious question, and it's when someone buys a cemetery plot, does property rights go with that? I mean, as far as any type of ownership of the property?
They only,
Representative Alexander, you recognize.
they only own the internment right. They only own the internment rights. They do
Okay.
not own the land itself.
Representative Bricken.
Sure.
Members, anybody else want to dig into this anymore, or we? Chairman Clemens, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is about the amendment. I'm sorry, I'm just seeing the amendment with regard to the calls of action. So this says a calls of action does not arise from them doing this if it's been reclaimed by the cemetery. Is there any, are you intending to prohibit if they make a mistake and eliminate any calls of action if they don't comply with this piece of legislation with regards to properly taking it after 75 years?
Representative Alexander.
Can we go out of committee and have the Cemetery Association answer that question?
Lovin might be able to answer. I didn't mean to cause a. Sorry.
I'm afraid we cannot do that, Representative. We do have them on the list. Yes, send them on up. Okay. All right, we had to verify that real quick. So we're going to go out of session. And please state your name for the record and wait till your red light is on before you speak. Okay, you're recognized.
Thank you. My name is David Sansom. I own Post Dynamics Incorporated, which operates Oak Ridge Memorial Park in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. And I apologize. Would you mind repeating the question?
Chairman Clement, you recognize.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in this amendment that I'm just saying, sorry, it says there's a cause of action that a cause of action does not arise if they reclaim this. If the cemetery reclaims this space according to the section. And so my question was just for the purpose of the record, whether it was the intent to prohibit a cause of action if someone doesn't reclaim it according to this section, or if they falsely reclaim it.
Yes.
Mr. Sampson, you recognized.
My apologies. If a cemetery does reclaim a space, there is actually a kind of a turn back period. The family has 20 years in which they can come back to the cemetery. If someone showed up and said, no, wait, we've been out of contact, but we wanted to keep these plots in our family, then the cemetery is required to return those spaces to them. If those spaces are not available, we're required to give them an equivalent amount of property or the dollar amount that those spaces would have sold for if we resold them. As far as if something was taken back in error and didn't abide by that, I don't know specifically if there's anything in the bill about that, but I know that they would be subject to any type of litigation that any cemetery would be subject to should they have made a mistake in regard to property ownership.
Chairman Clemens.
Yeah, just so to clarify, so if you inappropriately reclaimed a spot, and I want to be buried next to my mama or whatever, and you reclaim that spot after only 50 years, let's say, do I have a cause of action still if this legislation passes?
Mr. Sampson.
Yes, sir. As I understand it, you would have full rights to file a lawsuit, just as if nothing had been reclaimed and somebody had double sold that space. Yes, I believe the person would have lots of recourse. Absolutely.
Chairman Clemens.
Thank you. That's all I wanted to get on the record. I just want to make sure that intent was clear. Thanks.
Members, while we're out of session and while we have Mr. Sampson down here, does anybody else have any very specific questions besides Representative Hardaway? No, I'm kidding. Representative Hardaway, you recognize. You're recognized, Representative.
Thank you, Chairman. I think, good afternoon, sir. Is there any difference in your business? Is there any difference now in how long people are living and actually dying? And I'm asking that because I'm not sure why we chose the length of time that we chose, but I'm looking at generations, whether that's one generation or two generations or three generations, where information may have been lost, and then somebody starts looking through paperwork and boom, here it is, and they come to you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Sampson, you recognize.
Oh, thank you. Yes, sir. That is a valid point that yes, people are living longer than they have ever before, thanks to wonderful medical technology. We chose this time frame because we were looking at, what's the typical age in which people purchase cemetery property. Most of the time, people don't tend to purchase cemetery property until their 50s, 60s, or 70s. As a general rule, sometimes not, but that's for the most part. So if we look at somebody who is, let's say we'll take that in the middle and let's say they're 50 years old when they purchased that cemetery property, that would have been a contact with the cemetery. And if we never heard from them again after that, and then we waited 75 years beyond that, then that individual would most certainly have been long since deceased. But in addition to that, we do give an extra 20 years on top of that after the reclamation period, where someone can come back and be able to obtain financial compensation or be able to obtain the closest adjacent cemetery property that is available. In my experience, when we go, any type of length of time that's that long without any contact with somebody, it's, as a general rule, they've usually died and been buried elsewhere, or have been cremated long ago.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Chairman. And are the monies escrowed, the initial monies, or the monies for the second sale after the property has been reclaimed? Are those monies escrowed? And if so, for what period of time?
Mr. Sampson.
Yes, sir, Representative Hardaway. The monies are not escrowed. So what the process would look like is that we would go through the procedure to establish contact and to search for the person. If we're not able to search for that person, and it's met all the guidelines of the bill, then at that point, the cemetery is able to offer those spaces to others, which is a great thing because oftentimes there might be family members from another family that are buried right next to there and would love nothing more than to be able to be next to their family, but there's not been anything available. So someone could then purchase those spaces, and then the cemetery would handle those per the Department of Commerce and Insurance regulations, whereby we then actually would be trusting for a second time the applicable perpetual care into the perpetual care trust fund. So there would actually be perpetual care that's been paid twice on that space. The remaining amount would go to the cemetery for them to use, for their general operations, maintenance, and the general operation of the cemetery. But should somebody come back, I think this may be what you're asking, should somebody come back and within the 20-year period and want to obtain the amount of money for which the cemetery had sold those for, then that is up to the cemetery operator to provide that out of their company funds at their expense.
And Mr. Sampson, I did want to clarify, looking at the bill, it's 25 years after the first 75. So
Excuse me.
75 plus 25. It'd be about 100 years here. Representative Hardaway, you recognize if you have anything else?
Yes, sir. Probably just a statement, no response necessary. And without that escrow, I'm not comfortable. One of the first things that I had to deal with here, and I think a lot of what Representative Camper is dealing with now, are cemeteries that have gone into financial distress, some bankrupt, some just walked away from the company, from the land, the cemetery. So I'm not comfortable with the fact that there's no insurance that those monies would be available if and when a family rather, or individual showed up and said her family was just out of touch for one reason or the other, but we still want to enforce our rights to that. And how do you compensate them if you're bankrupt or if you're otherwise financially in distress? So I'm not comfortable with that, but I'll take that up with the sponsor, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
All righty. Members, we're still out of session. Does anyone have a question for Mr. Sampson while he's here? If not, we're going to go back in session. Thank you, Mr. Sampson. Appreciate you. We're back in session, and we are back on the bill as amended. Does anyone have a question for the sponsor? If not, sponsor, I do want to thank you. You've put a lot of work into this, and this is an industry you've worked in, and it seems like a very reasonable bill. And 100 years is a long time for somebody to figure out if they have a grave or not. So I support you, Bill. And members, we're going to go ahead and vote to send House Bill. Oh, okay. Representative Hardaway, you're recognized.
Yes, sir. I respect the sponsor very much, and just wanted to know there's only that issue that's keeping me from supporting the bill. I've worked with you in the past on similar legislation, so that's the only thing that's keeping me from supporting the bill. Thank you, Chairman.
All righty. So if no other questions, members, we're going to vote to send House Bill 713 as amended to full commerce. Madam Clerk, can you open the board? Please cast your vote. Has every member voted? Does anybody wish to change their vote? If not, Madam Clerk, take the vote, sorry.
Mr. Chairman, you have 10 ayes, 1 nay.
All righty. Congratulations, Representative Alexander. Your bill passes. It's on its way to full commerce.
Thank you, committee. Thank you, Chairman. I'm dying to get to full commerce.
I love it. Thank you. Representative Capley has been waiting patiently to present his bill, which is item number 7, and that's House Bill 561. We have a motion and a second. Representative Capley. It was a close call there, but you've got the motion and the second. I don't see any amendments, so you are recognized on your bill.
Thank you, Chairman. Your benevolence. It's good to see you again today. Chairman, Chairman and committee, this bill was brought to me by the Comptroller's Office. This bill makes government work better by improving utility systems' abilities to issue emergency operating loans, streamlining TBOR's contested case hearing authority, and enhancing the efficiency of bond issuance. So, Mr. Chairman, we could go into further depth if we'd like, or I could stop there.
Well, sponsor, that's good enough for me. Question's been called, and so we're going to go ahead and vote. Send House Bill 561 to full commerce. Madam Clerk, if you can open the board up. Members, please cast your vote. All righty. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? If not, Madam Clerk, take the vote.
Mr. Chairman, you have 11 ayes, 0 nays.
House Bill 561 passes. It's on its way to full commerce. And Representative Capley, we would invite you to stick around. We're going to hear from Tibor here in a little bit. And I could tell by the way you presented it that you'd like to delve in just a little deeper into that. So if you just want to sit down, give us about 5 minutes, you can hear a presentation.
Thank you, Chairman. I got some people. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right. It's an open invitation. All right. Members, that brings us to item number 9. And I'm going to pass the gavel off to our chairman, Chairman Vaughn.
Thank you, sir. And let me just say it's an honor to be here today, and I appreciate all of our participants in the back. I see y'all. I see what you people do, and remember, 5 stars when on our rating. All right. Chairman Boyd, you're recognized on House Bill 1143.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. House Bill 1143 is a pretty simple bill. A few years ago in Tennessee, we created a clean list of clean energies and a list of renewable energies. And a lot of folks thought that just needed to be combined into one list. And after a couple of years, I agree. And so this is simply merging 2 lists into one. And it also adds the word green in there with clean and renewable. Mr. Chairman, I renew my motion.
Thank you, Mr. Sponsor. I've got to say, congratulations on burning a bill spot for this one. That's there we got. Excuse me, Leader Cochran. I'm sorry, Leader Cochran, or you're recognized.
Just calling the question.
All righty. Question has been called on this. Madam Clerk, would you open the board and everyone cast your vote? If you've cast your vote, if you want to change your vote, we're about ready to ask Madam Clerk to tally the vote.
Mr. Chairman, you have 11 ayes, 0 nays.
All righty, that passes and is on its way to full commerce.
Representative Hardaway, I saw your hand up. For what purpose?
Yes, sir. I was just looking for an opportunity to ask Chairman Vaughn if when he took the gavel, did that mean we were under the cutie patootie rules?
Well, Representative Hardaway, whether it be me or Chairman Vaughn, you're under cutie patootie chairmanship today. I think three of us are here today. All right, so members, I hope you'll stick around because Chairman Vaughn and I, a couple of years ago, when we first got these committee assignments, e-commerce and me with business and utilities, we set about to really delve into how utilities are regulated. We heard from TPUC, we heard from the Comptroller's office, and we did something that needed to be done. And we took, I think it was 2 different boards under the Comptroller's office, and we merged it into a board called TBOR. And it's a board that that we've got somebody here today to talk to you about, but I just want y'all to learn a little bit about it. You may have a constituent, whether it be municipal, a public utility district, or a water authority or something that has a complaint. And if so, you're going to need to know these guys at the Comptroller's office. So we'd like to invite up Mr. Ross Colonna, the Assistant Director from the Comptroller's Office for Utilities. And it looks like the Comptroller himself, Mr. Jason Mumpower, will be up here. So members, we're going out of session. And gentlemen, I don't know if you've used our new electronic system up here, but you won't be able to talk until the red light comes on. And it looks like they're both on. And so I'm just going to turn it loose and whichever one of you is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jason Mumpower, Comptroller of the Treasury. I'm glad to be here and appreciate you inviting us and in particular Ross to come down and tell you a little bit more about TBOR. I wanted to come down though and reiterate something we talked about a couple years ago. And this is actually a true story that happened to me just a couple hours ago at lunch. Regularly, when I'm talking with people casually, maybe they're just trying to make conversation with me, but a common question I'm asked is, Comptroller, what keeps you up at night? And my answer is consistently the same. Because fortunately, in the state of Tennessee, there's not much to keep me up at night. We're a very well-run state from a financial perspective. But the way I answer that question is to say that what keeps me up at night is worrying about the financial condition of the myriad of utilities across Tennessee, because they are literally life and death issues. The utilities that deliver water and wastewater service to communities across Tennessee are very, very important. And in large part, they are very aged, particularly when you get out in our rural communities. And thinking back to the county I represented, the great county, Johnson County in upper East Tennessee, such a large number of utilities, small utility districts with one municipal system. And we just see that the economies of scale haven't been present there. And so I appreciate this focus, this committee's focus on utilities, on utility health, and on the business of delivering life-giving water and wastewater service. I also, Mr. Chairman, appreciate very much your work and Chairman Vaughn's work and all of your work in the bill a couple years ago to merge the Water and Wastewater Finance Board and the Utility Management Review Board into one, which is known as TBOR, the Tennessee Board of Utility Regulation, which is housed in the Comptroller's office. Ross Colonna, who I'm going to turn it over to in just a minute, is Assistant Director of the Division of Local Government Finance, really heading up our utility side of things. You know, good things that have happened since the creation of TBOR. I can tell you that the number of financial distress referrals coming to the board has decreased in the last 2 years. What is increased, we've seen an increase of investment in infrastructure, particularly which will help reduce the amount of unaccounted for water loss we have in our systems across Tennessee. We have seen the voluntary creation of more water authorities. And most importantly to me, perhaps, we have seen the voluntary merger of utilities. Ultimately, in order to take advantage of economies of scale, in order to take advantage of an opportunity to serve Tennesseans, we really need more utility mergers that will lead to a stronger utility system. And we have seen that in the past 2 years. So I appreciate very much the work of this committee. I wanted to be here personally to kick it off. And Mr. Chairman, unless there's any questions for me, I will turn it over to Ross. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and tell you all a little bit about what we do in the Comptroller's office with the Tennessee Board of Utility Regulation and how we, regulate the roughly 450 utilities that are under it. This isn't my first time here, so I feel like by now I probably know what y'all want to hear from me. But with that being said, feel free to stop me at any questions. We don't have to wait till the end. And also that keeps me on my toes a little bit because sometimes I get a little too comfortable and I need someone to shake things up a bit. So to start, there is a staff other than myself working for the Tennessee Board of Utility Regulation. We have our attorney, Seth May. We have Ben Johnson, who's a senior analyst, Megan Huffstutter, who's also a senior analyst, and she helps with the Middle Tennessee utilities, Nate Fontenot over West Tennessee, and Charlie Lester over East Tennessee. What's important to note about those folks and also myself is our sole job isn't the Tennessee Board of Utility Regulation. We also do other things within the Comptroller's office. So there really is no staff that is solely designated to the TBOR. Instead, we kind of share our time, whereas the majority of my time is spent with the TBOR. The rest of the staff there, they do not, they're doing other things in the Comptroller's office as well. And I like to think that because of everything we do, it's kind of impressive that we don't have anyone solely dedicated, because when there's 450 utilities and customer complaints that we get in, there's a whole lot of work cut out for us. So a few of the things that I want to discuss today, and to briefly talk about the TBOR and what we oversee and how it's structured. We're going to talk about financial distress, mergers, customer complaints, administrative review, and then I'll briefly conclude. So to start, this public chapter 463, as the comptroller said earlier, in 2023, it merged the WWFB, which had oversight over municipal systems, county systems, and authorities. There were about 280 of those, water and sewer, and the Utility Management Review Board, which is about 170 utility districts in Tennessee. That was water, sewer, and natural gas. When these two things were combined, it also expanded the authority to gas, municipal, county, or authority systems, whereas there was no financial oversight of those other than the audit and budget approval through the comptroller's office. So with that being said, who makes up the board? The board is comprised of 11 individuals. We have our chair, which is an employee of the comptroller's office, the comptroller's designee, Greg Moody, Tom Moss, vice chair. He previously served on the previous boards, as it did Greg. Edwin Carter, a comptroller employee. He is new to the TBOR. Steve Stone, Middle Tennessee Natural Gas, the House Speaker appointee. He previously served on the UMRB. David Perkey of the Moorestown Utility System. He's the Senate Speaker appointee. He's a new addition to the TBOR. And then there are 6 governor appointees. We have Candace Van Osdale of Harriman. She was previously on the WWFB. Alex Smith, he's a new addition from Humboldt Utility Authority. Bruce Giles, First Utility in Knox. He's been on the UMRB for quite some time now with the TBOR. Eugene Hampton also had history with the boards. He's with Metro Nashville. Britt Dye, he's a new addition, Fayetteville Public Utility, and Anthony Pelham, Warren County Utility District, and he was previously with the UMRB. And I stress that to show that there is continuity from the previous boards, because a lot of people ask the question, did we treat utilities different based on how they were owned, whether it's a city system, a county system, or a utility district? And my board didn't really, the WWFB and the UMRB didn't really treat the systems different, which is why it was necessary to combine the boards. Because in our opinion, a utility is a utility. It doesn't matter if the city owns you, a county owns you, a utility district. Your one role is to provide service to your customers, regardless if they are a citizen of the city, citizen of the county, if you're just a customer. Your one goal as a utility, doesn't matter how you're owned, is just provide safe, at the cheapest price service to your customers. So what do we regulate? The main thing that we do is financial distress. Another thing that we do is water loss, and I'm going to discuss that a little bit later. We have a training, which y'all had a bill that was passed today out of here from Representative Marsh, decreasing that training requirement, and then managerial, technical, and financial capacities, and that's for all water, sewer, and natural gas local government-owned utilities in Tennessee. There's a few other types of utilities in Tennessee, but this is the majority of them across the state. So what is financial distress? So the first thing, the main one, the majority of what we deal with is 2 years of a decrease in change in net position. And so in 2017, there was a law change that caused a large influx of cases for both boards, and we've been kind of dealing with the fallout of that law change since. I don't use fallout as a negative term, because it was very important, that law change that occurred in 2017, and has allowed us to cure a lot of the financial difficulties that were going on that we were unaware of due to the law change. Also, deficit net position, deficit unrestricted net position. There's an asterisk by the unrestricted net position, because that is a new addition under the TBOR. And, if you're not an accountant, that might seem like a strange term, but really what we're looking for there is liquidity. Deficit net position, your liability shouldn't be more than your assets. And unrestricted deficit, we just want to make sure that there's liquidity within your utility to be able to pay for the operating expenses that you got going on. Obviously, you don't want to default on debt. That's bad. We can all get behind that. So if there's a utility that defaults on debt, we have issues with that. 2 years of delinquent audits. What we do and how we do our job is based on audits. All these utilities must be audited annually. If you are more than 2 years behind on your audits, we can't do our job adequately. So automatically, you're considered to be in financial distress and we treat them as such because, if it's kind of like when there's smoke, there's fire. If there's no audits for the utility and they can't get their audit history straightened out, there's probably bigger problems going on locally. And then an illicit transfer of funds. If you're a city that has a water fund, you shouldn't be transferring water money to the general fund to pay the police officers, just as you shouldn't be taking the taxpayer money to pay for some water issues. Water money should be water money, so on and so forth. And so if you didn't get proper approval to transfer those funds, you're considered in financial distress as well. One of the tools that we use to remedy financial distress is mergers. That's kind of the last Hail Mary, the last thing that we like to do. The UMRB could order mergers, but whenever the board was created, it expanded the authority to allow for any utility under the TBOR to be subject to a board-ordered merger to cure not only financial distress, but also if there's other financial or other managerial issues where we're just dealing with a tiny, tiny utility that constantly has managerial issues that might result in some sort of fraud or waste or abuse. And we think that the only way to remedy this is to force them to merge with the surrounding utility. Because one thing that's interesting about utilities in Tennessee, and I don't know the number off the top of my head, but I'd be happy to provide it if y'all are interested, is a lot of utilities, when it comes to water and sewer, they're purchasing the water that they're selling to their customers from a neighboring utility, or all the wastewater that they're treating, they're just pumping it to the neighboring utility for treatment. So in effect, we have a local government, a utility that's serving as a middleman. And oftentimes when you look at the price increase from the wholesaler to the retailer, sometimes it's not warranted. So that's really the low-hanging fruit when it comes to utility mergers, is whenever someone is that utility is just a middleman. There's really not necessarily a huge need for them to operate as a middleman. So what does the financial distress process look like? Once we get the notification that you're financially distressed, we send you a questionnaire. It's pretty lengthy. We get it back, and then at the end of the day, the utility is a monopoly. It's kind of crazy that you have these monopolies that are losing money for a resource that people need every day. And so if you're losing money when you're running a monopoly on something that someone's going to use every single day, what's the easiest way to cure that financial distress? It's to tell you to raise your rates. A lot of times you look, they haven't raised their rates in 5-10 years. The price of everything else has gone up, but the price of the utility hasn't, which is crazy. Things are costing more, especially now. We're all feeling inflation. There's no reason that your utility should be isolated to that. So we tell you to get a rate study done. A third party comes in, does the math, because there is no politics, there is no emotion, there is nothing behind utility rates except math. It's a wonderful thing to deal with whenever you can just point to the math and say, this is what the rate needs to be. So we have a third party come in, they do the rate study, and then the utility adopts the outcome of the rate study. If the utility chooses not to, we can refer it to the Attorney General's office for enforcement, but we don't really ever have to do that. The utility just listens to the order and adopts the rate study. We also order them to review some policies just to make sure that everything is up to par. So the next thing, that's when we place them what we call order implementation. We ask them to implement the order, and then we kind of review to make sure that they have implemented everything that we're ordering, and then we push them into the update cycle. Currently, out of the 450 utilities in Tennessee, we have 37 utilities that are in the order implementation. So they've gotten a rate study done. They're told to get a rate study done. We're waiting to make sure it gets done, and they implement it, yada, yada, yada. But after that, that's when we push them into the update cycle. If it takes generally 2 years of loss for that utility to come under us, we like to watch you for 2 years to see 2 years of positive growth. And if we see 2 years of positive growth, that's when we're able to release the utility from financial distress. If we see that after 2 years, maybe 3, that you're still struggling, we're going to order another rate study to be done because something was wrong with the original one that was completed. A lot of times it's because maybe the correct information wasn't provided to the consultant that was doing the work. And so another rate study is performed to get them out of financial distress. So another thing, and this is huge, this was a really big part of the TBOR and something that I'm really happy and I'm proud of that was done. Earlier I said that we're dealing with monopolies here. not only monopolies, but we're dealing with local government monopolies. And so a lot of times it's difficult for the public to trust the utility because, one, it's the government, and two, it's a monopoly. And a lot of times the customers have difficulty working with those utilities. And so now there's finally an outlet for individuals to appeal certain concerns to the T-Board regarding these customer complaints. And so if a customer has an issue, and I'll go over some of the things that they're allowed to appeal to our board, that if they have an issue, they can bring it to the local government first at a public meeting. The local government must then vote to grant the remedy that the individual is seeking. If they choose not to grant the remedy or decide to take no action, then they're able to appeal it to our board. Our board will then have an informal hearing to hear the complaint and then make a decision on whether to grant the remedy to the customer, ask us to get more information, or, vote in favor of the utility as well. Because, just as much as we're there to protect the customer, because that's part of what we're charged to do, we're also there to protect the utility, to make sure that they're not being taken advantage by, a customer in their area or something of the sort. So some of the things that we can have an informal hearing on to assist customers and customer complaints is the justness and reasonableness of a utility's rates, fees, or charges. That one's pretty straightforward. If the customer thinks that the rates are too high, they can appeal it to us. Most of the time, that's not the case. I mean, we have I hear from customers all the time that the rate is too high, but when I talk to the utility, they say, listen, we got a rate study done. And I look at their audit and they're, barely skimming by, or they're, not making too much money, quote unquote. And so, they're just and reasonable. So we're not going to hear that case. But if there are instances, and there have been, where the rates are too high, we're able to hear that case and try to get to the bottom of why they are so high. Another thing is the justness and reasonableness of utility systems requirement that a customer or developer build infrastructure or fixtures to be dedicated to the utility system. This happens often with developers. The developer wants to put in a subdivision or a building or anything of the sort. And utility says, well, you're going to need to put in, a grinder pump and this size pipe, so on and so forth. And the customer may, the developer, the customer may disagree and think that it's unnecessary. And so they have the ability to appeal it to us for our board to decide whether it is just and reasonable. And a lot of times we're just asking for engineering reports to just see, why certain things are being asked for. Next, we have the failure of a utility system to adopt and enforce policies or rules for, the responsible operation of the utility. That one is pretty straightforward. If utility doesn't have certain rules or policies that all utilities pretty much do, we're able to hear those cases and figure out why the utility doesn't have that, and we can order them to adopt a policy. And the next portion is the inadequacy of a policy. So just because you have a policy doesn't mean that it's a good one, especially if you're not following it. And so we're able to hear cases in which a utility didn't may have a policy, but it doesn't really serve the purpose that it should be in serving the customer. Failure to extend service. This was a pretty big portion of the customer complaint process that was brought before the T-Board. The failure of a utility system to offer or extend utility service to a customer located in the covered area, located within an area in the utility system offers similar services, located in which the utility has the infrastructure to offer similar services. And so the majority of that is, it's just saying that if you have a customer that wants to hook on to the utility that is in your service area, you have to be able to show one of the following things as to why you're not going to allow them to hook on. That you don't have the capacity to serve the customer, that the service to the customer is not economically feasible. And I see that from time to time. We'll get people call and say, the utility won't run me a utility line to my property. Well, you're the only person that lives at the end of a 3-mile road. And for the utility to put in 3 miles of pipe just to serve one customer, it's not economically feasible. And then service is not in the best interest of the utility and its existing customers. And so this goes back and forth. A lot of times we see where customers believe that it's within their rights, that they should be served and they should get service from the utility. And a lot of times we think that the utility isn't doing its responsibility in serving the community, because we all know Utilities are, in my opinion, the biggest roadblock to growth in an area. If there's no utilities, if there's no water service, sewer service, or sometimes natural gas, I don't deal with electric, so I can't speak for that. But if there's no water or sewer in an area, a lot of times you can't see the growth. And so if there's a utility that is purposefully not serving an area for a myriad of reasons, we're the body to ensure that the utility is doing the responsible thing and being good stewards of the community to help grow in areas where it's needed. So another portion of what we do is what we call administrative review, as according to the code. Previously, it was known as board investigations. This is where we had a little bit more leeway to try to fix issues where they weren't necessarily financially distressed or something of the sort, but there were definitely issues going on. So we were able to open a board investigation under the UMRB to go and check out the utility, see what's actually going on, and get under the hood and look at it. But now this is expanded to all the utilities, and it's referred to administrative review because a lot of times people get confused what we did, thinking that it had to do with the comptroller's division of investigations, where we're reviewing for fraud, waste, or abuse. And this has nothing to do with that. This is about the financial, managerial, or technical capacities of a utility. Sometimes we'll have a DOI investigation that will lead to a board administrative review. That occurs from time to time, but they have nothing to do with each other most of the time. So the next portion that I want to discuss is water loss. Water loss is a pretty big deal in Tennessee. There are a lot of utilities that overlooked or chose not to be good stewards of their utility, and they let their infrastructure degrade. And it's very problematic because when your business is just to sell one product to a customer and you're pumping it into the ground for no reason, that's bad. There's no business that should be operating that way. That number for a utility is never going to be zero. You're never going to have a utility that doesn't lose any water because there's certain flushing and things that go on. But that number shouldn't be. The T-Board set it at 40%. You take your water sold, you take the water produced, you do the math, you find the water loss percentage. We found the median to be roughly 31% in Tennessee. And so we felt comfortable setting the number at 40%. So if you fall above that 40% threshold, you refer to the Tennessee Board of Utility Regulation for corrective action to figure out how to deal with the water loss. So the last thing that I want to discuss is what are we going to be looking for in the future? The T-Board's new. It's relatively new, but I feel like we finally have our feet under ourselves and combining the boards, training the staff, what's next. Our main focus is financial distress, and that's where we've spent a lot of our time and energy. We're going to be dedicating more time to water loss regulation and really pulling the utilities out of that have water loss issues and spending more time doing that type of regulation. We're going to be able to prioritize more proactive regulation, dealing with problems before they become problems. We collect a lot of data points in the comptroller's office, and we're able to see a lot of trends, and we're hoping to be able to deal with problems before they violate the law, spend more time with utilities that don't realize they need the help or know they need the help and refuse to ask for it. And so we're hoping to be able to do that. One thing that it piques my interest personally is, on the other hand of water loss, you have inflow and infiltration, and that's essentially water loss, but for the wastewater. So that's when you have, some things like stormwater, rainwater that's getting into a sewer system that's going through the sewer system that's being treated as wastewater, even though it's pretty much clean, it was rain. And so the utility is having to pay a significant amount to treat that wastewater, even though it really shouldn't have been in the utility to begin with. And so we're contemplating ways to figure out how to regulate that, to force wastewater systems to deal with their water loss. And last, we just want to continue to advocate for mergers and consolidations. I see a lot of small utilities out there that are not doing their customers any benefit by remaining in business. They're not taking advantage of the economies of scale. They buy all their water from their neighbor and then they sell it to the customer at a premium for literally no reason because you're not looking for any like shareholder return or anything. This is a local government. We're not looking for profit here. You're just supposed to be providing a service to the customers. And so we're a big advocate for mergers and consolidations, and that's the number of utilities in Tennessee is going to continue to shrink. And that's how it needs to be, because, you know, if a lot of people want to focus on how difficult things can be for rural Tennessee, places that are poorer in nature, you know, there's no reason why their water should be more expensive if they would just sign up to merge with the surrounding utility and provide a cheaper service to its neighbor or to its customers. So in conclusion, we talked about the T-board structure, financial distress, administrative review, water loss, and kind of what we're going to be doing in the future. With that being said, I'm happy to answer any questions that y'all may have, and I appreciate your time.
Ross, we appreciate you coming today and talking with us, guys. We got a couple of minutes left. Representative Bricken, to recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I thought of a couple of questions during your presentation, and certainly appreciate you being here. One, just a simple one. How often does the T-board board meet?
Yeah, so generally we schedule 3 meetings a year. I think we're going to bump that up to 4. We're only required to have 2. So I would like to say 3 to 4 a year.
Okay. Second is delinquent audits. Just currently, how many districts fail the delinquent audit requirement?
Off the top of my head, I want to say it's less than 15, less than 10 to 15.
And just staying with that, because in my previous life as an auditor, I guess, small cities that might have small utility districts usually have delinquent city audits, and everything else, it just goes hand in glove. But if you go more than 2 years, I guess you can certainly, I'm not sure what the penalties are for delinquent audits. And I think I asked Stephen the question is, why doesn't the comptroller just come in and complete the audit and charge them for it?
Sure. So a few things there. And one, sometimes there's nomenclature issues when it comes to utilities in Tennessee. And I want to be very clear, a utility district is a completely separate entity from a city or a county or anything. So if you see, you know, for example, we could just say Nashville Utility District. That's not a thing, but let's say that was a thing. Has nothing to do with the city of Nashville. You could have Wilson County Utility District located in Lewis County. It is completely separate. So a lot of times people say district and it has nothing to do with the actual entity. But with that being said, I do agree with what you're saying in that, you know, if you have a city that owns a utility and they're delinquent on their audits, that means I don't have their utility audit either. The penalty for that, there's actually I don't want to go too far into it because I don't work in the Division of Local Government Audit, but I will be sure to share your comments and someone will come around to talk about it. You know, there are certain ways for us to get a local government to perform the audit, you know, as far as the T-board goes. That's what I want to address here. We can force them to go down that route to perhaps contract with a third-party CPA for them to come in, get the books straightened out, and that way the audit can be performed, because that's what the issue is. A lot of times the books just aren't, you know, prepared. Now, as far as our office just being able to go in and do the audit for them, I would feel more comfortable with the comptroller answering that question. I think a lot of it is just, I don't necessarily think we have the authority to do that, but I'm not an attorney and they'll probably be mad. I'm guessing at an answer there, but that would be my assumption.
Go ahead.
Question if I can.
Yeah, go ahead.
It deals with the wastewater issues on leakage, bad pipes going around the district. Do your board and TDEC, when TDEC usually monitors wastewater leakage, I guess. So, do they bring those issues to y'all and y'all address them, or which way?
Yeah, so when it comes to wastewater leakage, doesn't really happen that often. A lot of times that also has to do with the Department of Health. Whenever that does occur, and I'm trying to think in the years that I've been doing this, I can think of 2 cases where it's been severe enough to come in front of our board. Whenever I was referencing the inflow and infiltration, I don't know that if that's what sparked your interest. This is where you have a sewer line and wastewater is getting into the sewer line, but that doesn't necessarily mean the wastewater is coming out of the sewer line and getting into, the public. That's really not what's occurring here, because those lines generally aren't pressurized. So you don't really have, however, I have seen issues where customers call me and say, there is raw sewage in my yard. And, that's not unheard of. And that's when the Department of Health has been involved and TDEC has been involved. And most of the time that's because of a faulty grinder pump at the residence of the customer, and it's actually the customer's equipment that's failing, and it has nothing to do with the utility because they're flushing things they shouldn't be flushing. But yeah, we don't really have that a lot come in front of our board.
Chairman Kevin Vaughn, you recognize.
Thanks, Ross, and we appreciate your words of wisdom. And to kind of dovetail what we were talking about today in commerce, the ability of people to access utilities at a reasonable cost is going to be one of the points of conflict we see growing or as days go by, as we try to solve development issues, affordable housing issues, provision of industrial sites. All of these things are going to be brought forward, and sometimes people can arm the access. They can politicize or weaponize the access to utilities for political purposes. And that's going to be something that I'm really happy about T-Board being involved in, the fact that we have a place where experts have guidelines by which to make decisions and people can find remedy. I brought this up is if y'all haven't had any interactions with him. He's a landowning constituent, but he lives in Memphis, and they've been having trouble. He has a sewer line on his property that he can't get access to. And so they have been getting the runaround for years. And I told him about the existence of T-Board. And this is a fairly sophisticated individual. He called me after dealing with Ross and his department, and he's got a contested case hearing coming up. But he told me, he said, I finally feel like someone is listening to me. He said, I am being treated professionally. He said, I am hopeful. He said, even if the case doesn't go the way that we would like it to, he said, I know that I've been heard. And he said, because they're asking the right questions. And for that, I just want to say thanks that it's nice to have a interface with the public that puts on such a good face for state government the way that you guys are doing it, and I appreciate it, and thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are always good to hear, that we're kind of doing our job half decent, right? But no, the one thing that I want to echo what you said, Chairman Vaughn, is that we're hoping that as time goes on and utilities recognize that there is a regulatory body that actually pays attention to these issues and is going to hold their feet to the fire, that it prevents the utilities that don't operate in the best interest of their utility, in the best interest of their customers. It's going to prevent them from doing so moving forward. So I think a lot of times utilities don't realize that we exist, and there really hasn't been an avenue for their customers to be heard. Because out of 450 utilities, it only takes a handful of them to make it seem like all Tennessee utilities are bad. And that is the farthest experience that I have had in doing my job. Don't get me wrong, I've gotten a runaround from a lot of them, and they've called me some pretty bad names, but I'm okay with that because the majority of them really enjoy working with me. But I think that this is a really good avenue for us to ensure that customers are being taken care of and utilities are being held accountable.
Ross, thank you for coming today. Appreciate the work you guys do. You're doing a great job. We're going back in session, and members, this meeting is adjourned.